Now, as you may know, the leader of the Shia Muslims in Nigeria, Sheikh Ibrahim ElZakzaky, is not happy with the conditions under which he's being treated in India, where he was flown after a court granted him medical leave due to his failing health while he was being detained in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Sheikh Zakzaky has been in custody since 2015. He was arrested after a violent conflict between his supporters and the Nigerian military, who claimed that his followers had blocked a military convoy. At least 60 people died in those clashes. Pictures purporting to be of an injured Sheikh Zakzaky were circulated then. His followers have been demonstrating for his release ever since, saying he's in poor health as a result of injuries suffered during those clashes. Meanwhile, the Nigerian government is reported to have apologized to India for the Sheikh's quote-unquote unruly behavior. The authorities are quoted as saying that the Shia leader has been making unreasonable demands, wanting to move into a five-star hotel and demanding the removal of police protection provided by the Indian authorities. Well, one of those who's raised the alarm about the deteriorating condition of Sheikh Zakzaky is the former senator and respected human rights activist Shehu Sani. We'll talk to him in a moment, but first, here he is speaking previously on Arise News.
They have been raising issues, but the protest is about their leaders' health condition, about the disrespect for court orders. Why should we not, for goodness sake, look at these issues and address them? Femi Falana has been the lawyer for the Shia Islamic movement, and he has spoken in a number of times, and we can see some images coming about the leader. So if anything will happen to this leader, I don't think that Nigeria will be able to contain the kind of problems that will arise out of that.
And the former senator and respected human rights activist Shehu Sani is with me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. I know you were driving in from out of town and you came straight from there to the studio, so we appreciate that. First of all, what do you know about Sheikh Zakzaky's condition? Because according to his daughter Sohaila, she says he has a problem of lead and cadmium poisoning, as well as failing eyesight and shrapnels in his body.
Well, I don't know anything different from what the general public were fed with, either from the family or from the members of the movement or from the government. But from what we can see, the images of what we can see was that it's clear that he has problem with one of his eyes. But the issue of lead poisoning and other issues are things which I don't have the details. But from my own understanding, when it comes to issue of detention, arrest, and imprisonment of such kinds, is that detainees or prisoners have the right to proper medical attention. And it is their fundamental right. And it is in the interest of justice and peace that government do take seriously issues that has to do with the health of people in their custody. The issue of Zakzaky has gone beyond a national issue. Organizations outside of Nigeria have shown interest. The media and even governments outside of Africa. I believe that the case which he has before the court, he can be prosecuted, but within the ambit of the law. And ideas such as denying him access to his lawyer, harassing him, making it impossible for his family, and now even issues which he has rose when it comes to the issue of what is happening in India. I think the government has to be very careful.
Well, I mean, just to bring up the point you made about what is happening in India, he released an audio tape in Hausa speaking about his conditions in India. He said they were being held pretty much in detention with armed police outside their hospital rooms, and they can't move from one room to the next within the hospital. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I have I've listened to the audio and the video which he has sent, and I've also listened to the statement from the side of the government. Well, as someone who has been a political prisoner many times, I knew that most statements that comes from government about their detainees are not true. So the idea of saying he's asking to be given a 5-star hotel treatment and also to be allowed this and that. We have been through this as political prisoners during the Abacha and Babangida era, and we know what they say about people they kept in detention.
And you don't think democracy has made a difference?
I don't think so, and I believe that what he said, I believe what the Sheikh said about his situation. He has been in detention for over 5 years, close to 5 years, and he lost almost 5 of his kids, and many of his members have been killed. I don't think that for such a man, even if he's allowed, can run away. Where is he running to for a man who has made such, who has found himself in such conditions? So as far as I'm concerned, what he said is the truth, and we should take it very seriously.
Now, we understand that they went to that hospital in India on the recommendation of their personal doctor. But we also heard that before they left Nigeria, the hospital decided not to admit him because the hospital staff were under pressure from the US embassy there in India. But they later changed their minds, and that's when the Sheikh ElZakzaky and his wife left for India. What do you make of that?
Well, I am not that, I don't know whether the US can be such.
Well, his daughter was the one who said that. His daughter was being interviewed. Sheikh ElZakzaky's
okay,
daughter.
well, if I don't know how the United States could have gone to the level of going to influence the medical processes of ElZakzaky, but from my own understanding, I believe that what he said was that they have their preferences of doctors that should look after him, and the government is giving him different doctors. So it will be in the interest of the government that they should allow his own medical personnel to attend to him, so that whatever happens, he will be held responsible to himself and not the government. So what the daughter was raising about him too, should be taken seriously.
Right. Well, according to the latest that we're hearing, it is that the National Intelligence Agency in Nigeria, contrary to the agreement made before Sheikh ElZakzaky left Nigeria, in which he was allowed, as you pointed out, to choose his own doctor in India, the NIA is now making the decision on his health. So now, in effect, the Nigerian government is in charge of his health rather than his personal doctors. Is that unusual, especially considering that before he left Nigeria, he reportedly made it clear to the Department of State Security, the DSS, that he's not comfortable with their doctors seeing him?
Well, if I am to advise the president and to also advise various organs of our security apparatus, my advice will be to keep a tab on him while allowing his doctors to attend to him. Because in a situation like this, which is a matter of life or death, whatever happens, if it is not his own preferred medical personnel, the government will be blamed. So why should you race into a trap? If the sheikh is sick and he said, this is the person who should attend to me, allow that person to attend to him and make it public that we have taken him to his own doctors. But if this insistence that it has to be our doctor, it has to be our own hospital, it has to be under our own conditions. It raises
suspicions.
It is in fact, they are getting themselves into trouble.
Right.
Yeah, so that is my view on that.
Do you think that was the intention from the beginning, that the Nigerian government was never going to allow his doctors to see him and was all along planning to be in charge of his health?
Well, I don't know the details of the agreement which they have made between the government and the Islamic movement leader, but from my own view, as one that was once a political prisoner, I knew very well that if you have someone in detention as a prisoner, whatever happens to him is squarely on the head of the government that keeps him there.
So given that
but
point...
when there is a demand that he should leave the country, what the government can do in a situation like this is that they knew very well that if anything bad happens to ElZakzaky, they will be the ones to be blamed. So all they need to do is, we will give you the necessary security cover, being a suspect, but take care of your medical bills.
Well, we've got about a minute before we take a break. Given that he is ill and he's in detention in India as well as in Nigeria, and his health has been taken charge of ostensibly by doctors nominated by the Nigerian government, are you one of those who is suspicious of what might or could happen to him?
Well, from my own position is that if it is the medical personnel from the side of the government that continue to oversee his health, then the government should be ready to take the blame of whatever happens to him. But if it is his own medical personnel, then the government will be exonerated for whatever happens to him. So that is my view.
So what would you like to see happen now as far as Sheikh ElZakzaky is concerned? Because he clearly no longer feels safe being in India under the current circumstances. Briefly, because we have to go to a break.
Well, my suggestion is that they should simply accede to his own request that his doctors attend to him.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Stay with us. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including as the demands for answers get louder in Nigeria after soldiers ambushed and killed 3 police officers whilst they were transporting a suspect in the northeastern state of Taraba. We'll get Senator Shehu Sani's take on that. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Enyegolu. Now, Nigerians are still agog over the shocking killing of 3 undercover police officers by uniformed soldiers in the northeast. They were caught in an ambush as they were transporting a suspected kidnapper. The military said they thought the elite police were kidnappers themselves. Subsequently, President Buhari convened an emergency meeting and ordered an investigation into the shootings, which were caught on camera and went viral on social media. Well, in the latest developments, a Nigerian policeman has been arrested after uploading a series of posts on Facebook in which he threatened reprisal attacks against the army for killing his colleagues. Well, in a moment, we'll hear from my guest today, Senator Shehu Sani, about all that. But first, let's listen to Andrew Ediale, elder brother of one of the police officers killed by the army, speaking earlier.
The action has not only undermined the integrity of the law of the land, but has caused grief to the family members of the deceased officers. They were on active duty, that is Inspector Mark Phillips Ediale, my younger brother, and other, that swore to protect this country. His wife is now a widow. His daughter has been rendered fatherless, and the family is grieving, shattered by this inglorious act. This is an outrage. It must not longer go on.
And that's the brother of one of the police officers who was killed. And the former senator and respected human rights activist Shehu Sani is with me in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. What's your take on the current face-off between the army and the police over these killings?
Thank you again. Well, the incident in Taraba reflects the complexity, the conspiracy, and the disorder when it comes to the issue of security matters in the country. If we have a synergy between the army and the police in prosecuting the war against the bandits or kidnappers on terror, this couldn't have happened. And secondly, the issues and questions that were raised after the killings of the 3 policemen shows that there are traces of conspiracy that exist. How 3 policemen can be killed and the kidnapper escaped are questions that need answers. And it also paints a broader picture of why we have been unable to address the security challenges in this country. In the northwestern part of Nigeria, you have seen how bandits have almost overwhelmed and overpowered our security apparatus, the army and the police. And in the northeast, the insurgency is still going on. But in Taraba, which is one of the ravaged states as far as kidnapping and banditry is concerned, this incident brings to spotlight the fact that the perpetuation of the insurgency, in the perpetuation of banditry and kidnapping has the imprint of security agencies there, because these policemen were on their duty and they have gotten hold of a wanted man, and then suddenly they were killed and the wanted man disappeared. There is no other way to describe this other than the investigation should go deep down and see how those that have killed him have been working in cahoot with kidnappers and bandits in that part of the country.
And are you happy with the terms of reference of the investigation ordered by President Buhari? Because they don't seem to be very clear, and it's not clear whether or not what you're asking for is actually part of the terms of reference.
Well, you see, from my own knowledge of confrontations between interagency confrontations like this, nothing much of substance comes out of it. Because you will find out that each time you have such a violent confrontation between the army and the police, reports have never been implemented to penalize anyone. And on this particular issue, why it becomes so serious is for the fact that it is one agency against another. If it were civilians that were killed, perhaps those civilians will have been tagged as part of the kidnapping ring. But now, since they were policemen, and policemen with a proven record of trapping and tracking kidnappers, then that is why it becomes such a very serious issue. And as far as I'm concerned, whatever investigation that will take place, if it doesn't go deep down to dig in the seats of collaboration between security agencies, then we are going nowhere.
And how much have these killings, in your assessment, heightened tensions between the police and the army in Nigeria?
Well, from my own understanding, I believe that these are issues that the National Security Advisor should be able to tackle. That office has been docile for some time, but I believe this should be a wake-up call that the NSC, Mangunu being a very nice man and experienced, should use this opportunity, let the war against banditry, insurgency, and all the violence, let it be done on the basis of a common front. Not the army doing its thing, the police, the DSS, and the Air Force and others doing. So if we can synergize and synchronize the activities, such could not have happened. In Zamfara state, for example, Zamfara, part of Katsina, and Niger state, and Kaduna state, these areas have become territories under the control of these bandits. But the example which we have been seeing from the governor of Zamfara state, the peace talks, the amnesty, the release of hostages, I think it's a step forward. But what is most important now is that all aspects of our security agencies should work together. If not, then these bandits will continue to exploit these differences and these confrontations to continue to operate. And I can see that part of the reasons why they don't want to work together is that some of them are working in cahoot with these kidnappers.
Now, the problem for the army is, of course, I mean, the PR obviously terrible as a result of this. But the other problem is that this incident has focused attention, as you correctly pointed out, on their conduct, not just in this case alone, but also in their conduct in the fight against terrorism and how they generally relate to the Nigerian populace. And that's not unique to the army, is it?
Yes. From what I understand is that if these security agencies don't synergize their operations, then we will simply continue to fight this battle till thy kingdom come. Because if you study what has happened in the last few years, whereby IDP camps were bombed, and sometimes the police or the army raid areas that they thought the insurgents are and end up killing innocent people. So if we can have a pool that shares information and also shares intelligence between the agencies, this couldn't have happened.
So this could be a wake-up call, really.
It is, and it's supposed to be not just a wake-up call, but a compass on where we need to move.
But do you think the army might have a point? I mean, just in the interest of fairness and balance, because all over the northeast, they've got checkpoints trying to stop Boko Haram militants and are understandably nervous about the state of insecurity there.
Well, when you are a trained security personnel or a trained soldier, you have been lectured and shaped to know the complexities of war and also to know how to separate civilians from your targets. And when you are in an operation, you take cognizance of the fact that you must minimize the possibility of casualties when it comes to innocent persons. So these are part of their training, and they should take it seriously. Now, it does not mean because there are insurgents, 1 or 2 insurgents in a compound with 100 people, so you have to kill everybody in order to get at that person. So as far as this issue is concerned, the policemen who were killed were victims of a disorderly security process.
But the other critical point is information about what's happened to that kidnapper whose arrest and capture led to this incident. Because, I mean, from what I'm reading, the perception is that the other complete failure on the part of the army that's been highlighted by critics is that the army, instead of releasing the kidnapper, should have taken him to their base for a complete debriefing, even if they thought he was a victim. But clearly that didn't happen. I mean, to just release the man on the street is quite extraordinary.
Well, it is the issue which people have been, and the questions they have also been asking, that how could have that, is it Wadume, his name? How could he have been able to get away with it? And the army, or particularly, not the army as a whole, those persons involved from the army cannot get away with such without providing the necessary answers.
Okay, well, obviously there are other questions, and I'm curious to know whether you're suspicious about what happened in between before this suspected kidnapper.
Well, if you have,
we've got 10 seconds, literally.
If you have a kidnapper in the hands of the police, and the police were killed, and they couldn't find where the kidnappers are or is, certainly the army is supposed to be blamed for that.
Okay, please stay with us. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat on various developments in Nigeria with the former senator and respected human rights activist Shehu Sani. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyagolo. My guest in this part of the program is the civil society activist and former Nigerian Senator Shehu Sani. Senator Sani is a well-known human rights and civil society activist, an author and a playwright who was a leading figure in the struggle for the restoration of democracy in Nigeria. He was arrested and jailed several times by past military regimes in the country and is one of the few Nigerian politicians to declare his assets. He was popular with his constituents, but last October left the ruling APC to join the little-known People's Redemption Party. Well, let's continue our chat on various developments in Nigeria with the former senator and human rights activist Shehu Sani. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you.
And we've talked about Sheikh ElZakzaky, we've talked about the army, but there was something I wanted to just get your take on as far as Sheikh ElZakzaky is concerned, and that's the position of the Kaduna State government. You're from Kaduna State. That's the constituency that you represented at the National Assembly. What do you reckon?
Well, I don't know what the position of Kaduna State government is, but what I know is that he is on trial for homicide, and the competent court of law has graciously permitted him to go for medical leave, and that has been accepted and obeyed, complied with by the DSS, and he is out of the country. So whatever, any position anyone will hold is simply his opinion, but the law has already done what it's supposed to do.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, well, we've got that one out of the way. Let's talk about Amnesty International. You're a human rights activist. You've been a civil rights activist for many, many years, and you never compromised that position even when you went into the Senate. You were known for speaking out vociferously about human rights issues. The government's criticism of Amnesty International, the government's bearing down on Amnesty International, what do you make of that?
Well, first of all, it's unfortunate that the government that has come into office with a promise and a pledge and a commitment to righting the wrongs of the past, respecting the rule of law, respecting fundamental rights, upholding democratic values, 4 years down the line could find itself in an open or subtle confrontation with such a reputable international organization like the Amnesty International. Yes, the government preside over the affairs of this country, but it is a democracy. The same Amnesty International stood on the side of many of those who are in the position of office today when they were being persecuted. Many were jailed, when many were driven to exiles, many were persecuted on several occasions. And I believe, I can remember during the military dictatorship, the Amnesty was one outstanding international organization that has stood for us. It can be credited as part of an institution that has contributed to the restoration of democracy in Nigeria. But the attitude of the government or the institutions of government in the last few years to the Amnesty International is a contradiction of those very ideals and ideas this government has stood for when they were in the opposition. If you can remember, when most of the leading elements in government today were in the opposition, they have spoken eloquently, and bluntly against the PDP when it comes to the issue of human rights violations and disrespect for rule of law. But here we have found ourselves in a new country where those fundamental issues that the government, people in government have stood against, are found to be wanting at this time here. So as far as I'm concerned, the government should bring an end to this confrontation. This sponsored protest in the office of Amnesty and the adversarial response to Amnesty's activities, I don't think is helpful. The president should be concerned about leaving a legacy that uphold democratic values and respect fundamental rights. Most of those persons who are in position of office today, who are encouraging the government to violate the law, to breach fundamental rights and disrespect court orders, will not be there when the president is empowered to defend him. We don't have a history or a culture of defending the human rights records of people in a position of power when they are eventually out of office. So I believe that for every human rights violation, for every disrespect for rule of law and disobedience to court orders, it goes into the record and legacies of the president. And many of these people will not be there to see, by the time he is out of office, he is retired either back to Kaduna or to Daura, many of these people will disappear.
Right.
We have seen how many of these politicians who are with Buhari, they were once with Obasanjo, they were once with Umar Musa, they were once with Jonathan. Where are they today?
Right.
They don't speak. There are even some of them who say they were ready to kill or to die for Obasanjo.
Right.
Many of them today cannot even raise a finger to protect or defend Obasanjo.
Okay.
When his name is being raised on as an issue.
Well, let me try and get to other issues because we've got about 4 minutes left, and I really want to get your take on some of these things. The arrest, for instance, we're talking about human rights of Omoyele Sowore. What is your take on that? What's your response to his continued detention?
Well, my position is very simple, and that has been clearly defined by law, that Nigerians have the right to protest. And don't crush and don't hate a protester so much because one day you will need him. Sowore was a friend to Buhari. He was one of those who used his influence and whatever he can touch to see to it that they remove PDP out of power. And how could such a person that stood for justice, for freedom, for democracy yesterday will simply be hunted into detention? What I have said is power is temporary. It's a phase in a life. Power is ephemeral. Those in the position of office today, tomorrow they will be out of office. And they will need a protester. They will need human rights. They will need a lawyer. They will need those to speak for them. Because when you are out of office, you are vulnerable. So I will say that for a man like Sowore, the government could have defeated him by organizing a protest that is bigger than him, the way it has been done in Venezuela.
Right.
You have pro-government and anti-government. But by detaining him, by imprisoning him, you are simply incubating him. That is my view.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. You were quoted recently by a newspaper, The Punch, of saying that the government of President Buhari and the North should support the Southwest for the presidency in 2023. That raised a lot of hackles because a lot of people said, well, why would you, someone who's a human rights person who's spoken out positively about balance and fairness across the country, be talking about the presidency going to the Southwest that's already had its turn when other parts of Nigeria haven't? Was that a correct quote, and what is your reaction?
Let me tell you, my correct quote is this. Knowing the complexities of our history and the trouble we have had in the past and the reality we face today as a multicultural and multi-ethnic state, The northern part of Nigeria has presided over the affairs of this country, at least from 2015, and we're going to 2023 with President Muhammadu Buhari. It will be fair and just that the major political parties should sit down and think of Nigeria, look at the possibility of giving either a southwesterner or a southeasterner the possibility.
Well, you weren't
if
quoted
the power,
as saying southeast.
no, what
You
I
were
said,
quoted as saying
what I said
southwest.
is that for the ruling APC, it will be an act of ingratitude for the Southwest to support President Muhammadu Buhari after 3 attempts to be president. Then it will be an act of ingratitude for the ruling APC not to look at the possibility of a president from the southwestern part of Nigeria. But I also said it, that in the general sense, we have never had a president from an Igbo extraction since 1999. I said it in what I said. Why should people continue to be punished for an historical issue that happens over half a century ago?
Okay, I'm going to have to interrupt you there.
Yes.
I'm really sorry about this, but we're literally out of time. You have walked into controversy there, though. Shehu Sani, thank you very much indeed. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again for a fresh edition tomorrow. From me and